characters might be iconic parts of films, but locations are just as iconic. Places like Los Angeles, Paris, and New York are the settings of some of the most famous films that we know and love. However, no location has had more influence than Los Angeles. The rich history and different locations allow the city to become anything the filmmaker needs the city to be. Locations like the beaches along the coast and the hills of Hollywood are central to the rich storytelling that we have known for generations. It becomes more than a setting. The city ends up becoming a character within these films. Much of these films are about Hollywood and its influence. Most of these films take place in either a film studio or show the audience the Hollywood sign to note exactly where the film is set. In both 1940s Ya Oughta Be in Pictures and 1960s Person to Bunny, the audience sees the golden age of the Hollywood industry through the eyes of beloved characters like Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig. These characters even show up in the Hollywood-centric Who Framed Roger Rabbit from 1988. The characters in all of these mediums are some of the most recognizable characters. This is evident in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as different animated characters like Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, and even Betty Boop pop up in the film. With these characters showing up, the film plays into the Hollywood aspect of LA through crime and the changing times of the 1940s and the 1950s. The freeway system also plays big roles in Who Framed Roger Rabbit and 2006's Cars. Both stories are based on true events of the introduction of the famed Los Angeles freeway system in the 1940s and the 1950s through Hiram Johnson. Who Framed Roger Rabbit's characters managed to save their hometown, also known as Toontown, from getting destroyed to make way for the freeway system. The town doesn't have to worry about losing their homes. Cars takes place in the present day after the freeway has been introduced. The small town of Radiator Springs becomes unknown and forgotten in the history books. The freeway acts as a sort of villain in both of these stories that either the characters have to defeat in the case of Roger Rabbit or overcome and adapt to it in the case of Cars. Most of these films take inspiration from Los Angeles, but don't quite look exactly like the city in the real world. This is apparent in the noir heist film The Bad Guys from 2022. The filmmakers used Los Angeles as their backdrop, particularly downtown Los Angeles, as we can see a lot of busy streets and a lot of tall buildings. The filmmakers have said, we reimagined the city, so there's no one place where you can recognize an actual building or landmark, but it still feels and looks like it's LA. They were inspired by the smoggy skies and the orange of the city skylines. The smog is actually emblematic of classic noir films, which implemented this technique to convey unease and confusion in the characters' lives. It may not be exactly like Los Angeles, but it comes close. Other inspirations come from the beach in Despicable Me, being reminiscent of Santa Monica, with the pier and the boardwalk on the beach side, where Gru bonds with Margot, Edith, and Agnes, and the Staples Center-like dome in the Goofy movie, where Goofy and his son Max strengthen their bond and go see a concert. Both places are used in a positive way to move the story along. They represent the destinations that the characters might not want to go to, but they end up there anyway, and it's for the better. There's so much more to Los Angeles than Hollywood and the freeway system. Los Angeles is a culmination of many different places and diverse communities. Places like South Los Angeles that include Watts and Compton are majorly absent from these types of films. These places coincide with more families of color and higher poverty rates. These places are generally absent from blockbuster films as well, which tend to include many live-action films that we all know. Audiences love seeing the glitz and the glamour and the spectacle of Hollywood, and the more mainstream stories that use this tend to do better money-wise and viewer-wise. Audiences have been conditioned to expect this from the earliest days of the Hollywood machine. In the early days, Hollywood had mostly white faces in front and behind the camera. These were the stories getting told. There wasn't much diversity to help expand what we see on screen. White populations are also not usually associated with poverty when we think about poverty in places where people of color reside from much of history. Hollywood took the film industry by storm, and there are no signs of it slowing down anytime soon. There are more stories to tell and much more broader and diverse stories to tell. The future looks bright for the industry, and hopefully every part of Los Angeles gets to be seen through the lens of animation and in these positive portrayals that we know and love today.
That's all, folks.